Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about change without chaos, turning manual effort into scalable execution. So thank you everybody again, once again, for being a part of our show. And today, the goal is we're going to go through 5 or 6 different scenarios of places that you can implement some change in your organization, or some areas that you can find inside your brokerage to help improve and get some positive impacts, some benefits out of some changes that can be done, and help you be more efficient, help you scale a little better, and overall help the business grow. And the goal here is that we want to give you these specific topics that you can look at and decide, like, are these areas that I should change in my brokerage, or are these areas that I do a really good job? And in either case, hopefully you're doing a really good job. But if not, we've got a couple experts here who can help us handle both the change side of it and give you some suggestions on the broker side. So I'm going to introduce them now. So we'll start with Lina, if you want to. We got 2 Linas, by the way. So
Yeah, which one?
our customer Lina, if you wouldn't mind starting out, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lina Gilbert with SFL Companies. I oversee the operations and technology.
Excellent, thank you, Lina. And then our other Lina is part of our Thai team. Go ahead, Lina.
Thank you. And yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lina Castañeda, Chief Customer Officer at TAI, where I get to lead the customer-facing teams that support brokers through some of the most critical stages of their journey, especially during the transition and the adoption of a new TMS. So yeah, very, very happy to be here today and excited to walk through the topics we've prepared very intentionally today to deliver a real and practical value to your business.
And I'm Walter Mitchell. I'm CEO of TAI, and I'll be helping facilitate the conversation as we talk through and show you both the expertise that Lina from SFL has, and how she's implemented some really cool things to solve these problems, and then also on the change management side of which Lina from TAI has brought. So our first topic that we're going to jump into is around POD and document recovery. So when we think about this part of the shipment flow, it's pretty critical that we want to save as much time as possible pulling documents back from carriers, and we want to make sure that when we're pulling documents back from carriers, that we're doing it as effectively and efficiently as we can, and making sure that we get all those PODs. We know we can't really send out invoices without a POD. We know that we have to get these. So how do you go about that process in your organization? How do you manage to spend time, or how much time does your team spend trying to get those documents back into your TMS, or at least linked up to your invoices, so that you can be effective in moving the shipment to the next site? So that's why it's so important, is there can be a tremendous amount of time wasted. And I know we've all probably can resonates nicely that there's a lot of effort needed to get a POD. So that's what we're going to talk about here, is some places that you can cut out a certain number of hours a week or a day on each of your team members to help streamline the POD and document recovery process. So I'm going to turn it over to SFL Lina and let you talk about a little bit, how do you handle that in your organization? How do you guys manage to pull documents back, and how do you use some of the technology to take advantage of it?
Yeah, we actually use one of my favorite things, which is the workflow automation. We've set up automation so that as soon as a shipment hits delivery status, automatically the system sends out a URL link and one of the content templates requesting that the documents be uploaded directly from the contacts at the carrier. So they're able to just click the URL and upload the documents directly into the shipment so that our team doesn't have to do it. We also put an alert on the shipment saying that those documents have been requested. As soon as those documents are uploaded into the shipment, the alert resolves. So our team is able to filter by that alert and just work on those exceptions that haven't been uploaded yet.
Nice. That's a great way to really take a few steps out of the process, right? So you found a way to, one, reach out to carriers without having extra work, and then second, have a nice way to track it when it does come in. And have you set up automations as well to resolve that alert? So once the POD comes in, that it removes the alert for them too? And
Yep.
It's excellent.
So they're able to just manage by exception. That's one of the great things about the workflow automations and the alerts is in a couple different areas, we've been able to create a situation where we're managing exceptions rather than having to touch every single shipment for documents.
Very nice. And now what about before you had workflow automation? How did your team do it? What did they do before that?
The good old fashioned reaching out to carriers after shipments delivered, and working through that normal process. And then they'd email in the documents. Our team would have to go through and pull up the shipment and attach it manually. So all those steps have been removed now.
Nice. I would try to ask how much time that saves, but I think that's we should have prepared that part ahead of time, right? But even so, we
plenty of time that I can tell you that. I can't quantify it, but I know that, again, just not even having to do the initial reach out and reminder, even if they didn't upload the documents, just that initial reminder that we need them saves a ton of time. But we are fortunate in quite a few, carriers do just hit that link and put the documents right. And it makes it easier for them, faster for them, and certainly saves our team a lot of time.
Yeah, it's a win for both the carrier and the broker, and then the customer gets what they want faster too. So you're kind of getting to check boxes off on all sides of that. Not to mention, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about a little bit of the psychology around automation, because one of the things that comes up is that people get worried that, well, it's going to replace our job. But I don't know that anyone in your team was probably sad that they don't have to send out those emails anymore.
No, and part of the change management on our end of things was more about controlling adding bodies rather than eliminating bodies, and everyone's aware of that. We're bringing these efficiencies so that as we continue to grow, it's scalable. So I don't think anyone's really concerned about technology replacing them. It's just about making their workload manageable and more efficient.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is worth mentioning is it's taking away a step that nobody wants to do anyway.
I was just going to say that I love that you mentioned that, because that's what I think is the real benefit here. And that's why this is so powerful, because when you automate document recovery the right way, of course, you are not just saving time. Like what you are actually doing is you're giving your team breathing room, right? Like you turn chaos into flow, and then you are removing all that invisible work that drains energy every single day. So you are replacing that with a process that really scales and protects margin and actually feels sustainable with time. So that is the kind of change that sticks, because people feel the difference immediately. And I am 100% sure of that, because I see it every day with our customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it. It's eliminating work that drains energy. That's so helpful. And that, I'm sure we all do spend a lot. I know I spend plenty of time in my day on things that aren't very exciting that I'd love to give away. So being able to take away things that drain energy and focus on talking to customers or some of the more exciting parts of our day is definitely a benefit there. Excellent. So now we've talked about, Lina, you've talked through some of the POD recovery and how you guys do it, how you guys automate that through workflow automation. And then, as we think about that, like more benefits as to how we wrap up this topic on POD and document recovery. Lina, do you have anything else that you wanted to add there?
No, also, when we are using the document processor, if someone is emailing, their documents in, we have it set to automatically go through the document processor. And the advantage there is that you're able to manipulate the pages very easily, where before we had to print pages, 1 and 4 to PDF and then reattach it, where within the document processor, you can move the pages around and exclude, extra paperwork that maybe isn't needed and things like that, which again, also brings efficiency and saves time for the team. Quite a bit of time in that one as well, even though it is a manual-ish process still.
Yep. Yeah, it makes it a few steps instead of a lot of extra work.
Mm-hmm.
I guess same thing that Lina said, we're taking away some of the steps that are adding friction or a little less comfortable to work with. Right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So thanks for running through that. And so as we think about the document processor, what we talked about here is that if you can implement a few things that help streamline the process or that eliminate some of the steps that your team probably doesn't want to be doing anyway, you can save a tremendous amount of time and energy and mental friction from your team. And so it's a great place to take a look at if you're looking to be a little more efficient, if you're looking to find ways to improve your brokerage, take a look at your POD and document recovery processes and see, is this somewhere that we're not doing that well, or what can we do to improve it and make that a little more streamlined. And I hope this is one of the takeaways that you can get from all of the different steps that we talk about here today, is that each of these have places where you can make some changes based on how your organization runs. So you should take a look at it and spend a little bit of time. And before the call, we were talking a little bit about time management, which is a whole separate subject. But during that focus time of think about, how does my team work with POD and document recovery, and does my technology support it the way I need to? Which is a great way to decide, like, maybe you need new technology, maybe you need additional technology, or maybe you just need to implement the technology you have a little bit differently to get more benefit out of it. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next topic. Our next topic is around margin compression. Oh, and by the way, we're happy to take questions. So if you do have questions, drop them into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout. But our next topic is margin compression. We're talking about here around real time, keeping track of your financials in real time, and how much knowledge do your brokers have when negotiating with carriers? Do they know what it looks like when they're talking to a carrier? Is this a common lane? Is it a challenging lane? What's the current trends looking like? Is the carrier likely to show up? As they see the margins compress, and we want them to be aware of both the buy and the sell side for what they're working with, and do they have the tools, or how are they going about making sure they're taking advantage of the tools to protect margin and make sure they're delivering a quality service to the shippers and working with carriers who are going to be reliable. So a lot to cover in that one topic there. So why don't we start out and break that down a little bit, and we'll start talking about, how do you go about measuring or taking a look at what you need so that you can negotiate with carriers in the most appropriate way?
So during the onboarding process, we connected, all of the relevant tools through the integrations that Ty had created. So we do have Triumph Intelligence included. We also uploaded all of our historic shipments. We have DAT connections and our highway integration. So all in one page, our team is able to see, lane history. They're able to see current, market conditions. They're able to see what vehicles are available, and they're able to see if the carriers are going to be possibly approved, within our parameters through highway. And it also shows us if these carriers have done work for us before, and if so, at what rates, how many shipments, all of that. In addition, we created workflow automations around the quoting piece. So when our team does send out the request for quotes, we have a content template that we modified to include, the URL as well as alerts, my other favorite piece of the system. And so if and when a carrier does return a quote to us, the team that sent it out automatically gets an email letting them know that a new quote has come in, and there is also an alert on the shipment. So they can continue working through their day, but be notified as these quotes do come in. And that makes it really easy to then, negotiate if needed, or to, accept a shipment and add the carrier to the shipment with one click.
Nice. So just so I'm hearing that right, you found a way to sort out through notifications a way to make sure that your brokers can alternate between loads as they're waiting for carrier responses, and keep all that information in context. So when they switch over and move from one load to the second, they're not getting confused on, well, wait, which carrier did I talk to on this load, which one on the other. That's really cool. That sounds like it could be tremendously beneficial for them to make sure they're making those decisions with the right context around them.
Yeah, that they're able to continue on with their day without, missing that a carrier has submitted a quote. We know as quickly as we want to get a truck on a shipment, carriers want to know if their truck is going to be booked or if they need to still be looking. So we really want to be able to respond to those, submissions as quickly as possible.
Yeah, get them off the market as quick as you can so you don't have that no-show load, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. And don't unintentionally book two carriers on the same load. That would be equally as bad.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think that's what it's important in here, just to understand the whole perspective and how brokers see that, within the operation. And also what we've seen with our customers is that margins don't disappear randomly, right? Like they're often given away in what we call the small moments. So for example, when someone is quoting without full visibility or negotiating on instinct, just doing the best they can, of course, but without real context, right? And it's probably hard to admit it, but I think brokers do negotiate sometimes blind more often than they realize. So yeah, the experience is huge and it does matter a lot. But experience without live data, it's still just a well-informed guess. So the challenge gets even worse when, for example, buy rates live in one place, sales rates live in another, market data is somewhere else, and then your team is just trying to connect all the dots in seconds. So I would say that is not a people problem at that point. It's just structural friction. So this is where actually real-time financial visibility changes everything here, not because it gives you better reporting, but also because it gives your team the ability to make better decisions in the right moment. So I don't know, even saving 1% on the buy side or the sales side could feel probably small in a single conversation, but then at scale, it becomes the real difference between flat growth and then profitable growth, right? Or basically between constantly feeling squeezed in a way and building real stability. So yeah, that's, I guess, the benefit here. Just less guessing, less pressure, more control overall.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. We have a customer, not SFL, a different customer that was sharing some information with me the other day. And they're located here in California. And what they were telling us is that as they tried to implement a tool like the truckload quoting page, which is what we're talking about here, when they had a hard time getting adoption. And so they went through a process of incentivizing their brokers on the floor to say, please use these tools and use all of the tools, and let's see what happens. And during that process, what they saw was once they started using the truckload quoting page and the tool that showed all of the information together, they were able to save about 25 or add an additional 25% onto their margins. And they did that by having their brokers do less work. So their margins were increased by 25%, and the amount of time and energy they were spending to process one load also reduced. So by making a change and focusing on driving that behavior to the better, newer process, they increase their margins and improve their efficiency all in one effort, which is pretty tremendous. Those are tremendous numbers and all fall into that category of, so great, we have this really cool page, and you mentioned a whole bunch of things on that page, Lina, around highway, around Triumph Intelligence and DAT, all tools that you can see all in the one spot. But how do you get your team to use it? And I think, well, Lina from Thai, I know that's an area that you spend a lot of time on. Do you have anything else to, how do you recommend that brokers help motivate people to use those kinds of tools?
I would say everything starts with having a good strategy internally, a strong leadership, and having that, champions that will promote the whole change among the team. And the very best way they have to do that is explaining the why, right? Like creating that urgency within the team, showing them what the real benefits are if you adopt this new way and what you are gaining out of it. So I don't feel like people resist change itself. They resist the lack of clarity and the lack of expectations and true consistency throughout the whole process. So I would say that is one of the best practices for everyone who's trying to implement and just get more adoption. Be very clear with the why behind what we are doing, and set the right expectations. Follow up always.
Let's go a little bit deeper on that. So you mentioned champion, and
Yeah.
having a champion. What's the role of the champion in the process?
So that is the person or the team that understands what we are doing, right? Why we are doing it, what's the plan, what are the timelines, what are we trying to accomplish? And then based on that, they will promote that with the team. They will try and get that buy-in from the team, making sure that they understand what we are doing, and making sure they all know what the role is and how each of them contribute to that main goal that we have. So they are the ones that will be promoting at all times that new change and making sure that adoption actually happens.
Yeah, I think on that you said something really cool in there, is that it's about demonstrating what the goal is and why you're making the change, not just the fact that there's a change. And the big difference in that, I think, is when you get to adoption, is that if you show people why they're moving that way and you demonstrate the goal, it encourages a lot more buy-in, right? There's a reason that this is happening, not just to make their life more difficult, which I think is kind of our default go-to when somebody says, hey, we're going to change a bunch of things on the way you work. Like, oh, great, my life's already hard enough. I don't need anything else. But if there's a goal and the goal is going to benefit that person, it gives you a lot more opportunity to buy in.
Exactly. Yeah. And with goals, I mean, those can be tricky as well, because you don't want to show like the huge big goal, right? That it's not attainable at the moment. You want to break it down in pieces that they can actually see, possible and attainable at the time. But you also want to show them the path. So you actually have to show them where we want to go, right? Like, this is what we are aiming for. However, this is the little specific goal that we are focusing on today. Let's just focus on that. Let's celebrate that win once it happens. And then let's continue on that same path so we can get to where we want to be. But don't try to, accomplish everything at once, because that's not going to help.
Yeah, show them the path. We love using that term. And the nice thing about that is show them the path means that there are a few steps to get to our end result. It's not just one step. It's not instant. It's going to take a few steps to get there, to walk down the path. And that's really helpful. So, Lina, do you have anything else to add on there? Like, how do you do this in your group? Because you do it all the time. And would you mind sharing how you get through this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, almost exactly what your Lina described is we, had a pilot team, and, depending on what each person's role was, we showed them the benefits and efficiencies that using the truckload quoting page would bring to their specific role, as well as to the team, to the company, and so on. But getting, that early adoption with just one team helped a lot, because then they're able to share that with others and give guidance and basically, prove the case out. And, once one of your coworkers or somebody that you're working very closely with is the one explaining the benefits, it's heard a bit more than when I'm just, like, this is great, please use it. They don't really want to hear it from me anymore. So that's really worked for us. And then again, having someone at each of the different roles be kind of an expert and have experience with it, they're able to go to others within the company that share the same role and show their perspective on the benefits. And to be really honest, with the truckload quoting page, it's easy to get adoption, because without it, we had to go to each of those separate websites outside of the system. So even just having all those tools available on that one page, it's not a big sell. It's very easy for the individuals to see the advantage of looking, you're talking to a carrier, you can see all their stats, and, whether or not we can even work with them without ever leaving the system. You have all that information right there in front of you, not having to click through tabs. Again, one of these like small things, it seems like a second here and there, but when you're booking 20, 30, 40, 50 shipments, those seconds really add up. And like I said, the truckload quoting tool makes it pretty easy to see where those benefits are.
Yeah, it sounds like you get the win on both sides, right? One is the strategy around the change management of what I heard you say was you do a kind of a phased deployment so you can build a champion inside your team and then help that. So it's not just you alone
Yep.
screaming from the rooftops, right? And,
Yes.
that's a great strategy. And then also the page itself is super helpful and provides all that information in context. So the path that they're heading down is pretty beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think another one important thing that you mentioned, Lina, is choosing the right people, right? And the right team. For example, your pilot team, they are the right ones because they know what it takes, right? They can relate to the benefit of it, and they can just persuade people on that. You get persuaded by people you trust, right? People you admire and people that can relate with your current needs. So that's very important as well. Choose the right team just to make sure that you get that buy-in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, Lina, do you want to bring that one home and wrap us up on the margin compression topic? That would be Lina from Lina.
Well, yeah, I think that as we just mentioned, everything that we can do in order to just automate the whole experience for the team and to remove friction from the team, just for them to be more efficient and get more time in order to do valuable work. It's something that we can all appreciate. And yeah, as I said, those are kind of things that maybe we missed because we are so used to the old ways, or because we are just, very used to this is the normal way, but it shouldn't be the normal way. There are easier ways and there are more effective ways in order to accomplish the same mission. So anything that can remove that friction from the team and anything that can remove the obstacles when you are trying to accomplish that goal, for sure it's appreciated and needed in your operation.
Very nicely done. And again, we'll take questions. If you have them, please post them in the chat. But otherwise, we'll keep moving along in here. So that wraps up our margin compression, and now we're going to switch topics to one that I think gets talked about quite often is check calls. So check calls are a pretty important part of the process. It's a responsibility as a broker to share information between shippers and carriers. That's kind of the role. And along those lines, a lot of times we're making calls to carriers to get statuses but getting the current state of the shipment is pretty important. It's a key piece of the shipment life cycle as it moves along. But have we ever thought about, like, how much time are you spending calling carriers? How much time is your operations team on the phone asking for a location or asking where they're at, or even scheduling appointments or verifying that they've actually unloaded or that they are bumped up to the door, right? Are these things happening, and how much time is your team spending doing these things every day? And I get it, like, some of it they're going to have to do because there's going to be challenges that come up, but are they spending time on the challenging ones, or are they spending time on every single shipment that's being moved? And how efficient are you there? It's for sure an area that you should take a look at in your brokerage and find out, like, what does my team really do? How much time does my team spend on the phone for each shipment that they're running? How many calls are being made? How many emails are being made? There's tremendous opportunity for improvement here, and some really cool things that can be done to eliminate a lot of that work. So I'm going to turn it over to Lina at SFL to tell us a little bit about how do you do it at SFL.
So we use workflow automations and alerts to manage the check calls as well. We do a few different things. We have a daily workflow automation that runs using the scheduler, where right before our team comes in, an email is sent out to the dispatch contacts for any shipments that are, in transit, and requests that they provide a location update. And again, we provide, a URL in that content template where they can just click in there, put in the update, and that goes straight into, the shipment. And when the scheduler runs, we add an alert to the shipment. When they do provide the information and submit their feedback, the alert is resolved. So again, when our team gets in, they're able to filter by that alert and just work on those exceptions. At the same time, we have a workflow automation that sends a text directly to the driver with the same, URL, where they can put the information in as well. You're getting it straight from the driver in that case. So we're hitting them, 2 different ways. We also have automation set up so that, like an hour or 2 hours prior to the pickup time, we can send out an email, send out, a request to make sure that they're on schedule. And that narrows it down to our team just working on the exceptions then. And it's easier for the carriers, the dispatchers, they're not having to answer our calls and things like that quickly. They're able to just provide that information back to us. And our team is just looking at who didn't respond and reaching out to those people.
That's really amazing. There's at least 5 or 6 different really cool tools in there that you guys are using to help eliminate some of the extra work and the manual work that goes along with check calls. And again, I think this falls into both categories of where you're helping your team and helping it make it a little easier on the carrier as well. And I think that's an important part of the broker experience, is to be thoughtful about how are we treating our carriers. Hopefully, like, do they want to work with us again, as along with those lines, and do they have a good experience working with us? It falls into that. So making it a little more streamlined for them and making it easy for them is a great way. What about visibility tools? Like, do you use any tracking platforms as well to help with tracking, and how does that impact your check call process?
Yep, we use MacroPoint, which again, we use the tie integration to connect that information, and it feeds, right into the system. So we're not going to just take someone's word for, their location. We do, cross-reference and make sure that trucks appear where they should appear. And there is a lot of visibility then in the activity log for exactly where the carriers are, as well as being able to see everywhere they've been, if they're on track, off track. And so it makes it really easy for the team. Another case where they don't have to leave the TMS in order to gain, the visibility from one of the outside, services that we're utilizing.
Yeah, that's really great. So you get to use both your internal team to help keep track of these shipments, plus you've got the external tool like a MacroPoint or one of those that's helping bring in some of the tracking information as well. And so and then as you mentioned, you're using both email and text messaging. So like multiple different pathways to make sure that you're getting that information from the carriers in a timely fashion. So, that's a really effective multi-channel strategy, right? And I think that's one of the things that we do need to think about if we're going to be reducing check calls or producing this no check call type of situation, which I think we would all really love to be in. That's going to require a multi-channel approach, and it sounds like you've implemented a few of those really nicely.
Yeah, it's been great. Like I said, and carriers they are important to us, equally as important as our customers. So, making it efficient for them helps with our building those relationships and having them, want to work for us as well. And again, disrupting, carriers while they're driving and all of that is eliminated because they're able to respond, at their convenience rather than when I'm calling at that specific moment. So it's been great.
Do you find carriers are still resistant to using one of the visibility tools like MacroPoint, or how's your adoption on that side look like?
It's great. I mean, right now we have over 90% of our shipments being tracked. And our team does a great job of following up and making sure that the carriers, know how to accept the links, but having the system send those links out automatically as soon as, the carrier information is added, which is typically done, by their dispatchers through the rate confirmation process. We get that information, the link goes out, but we do have over 90% of our shipments tracked. So like I said, between the tools and the diligence of our team, it's great.
90% is a pretty impressive number.
Yeah.
So then you've built in processes to have them follow up and make sure that it starts tracking is the part that you're talking about there, right? Getting them to make sure they understand how to use it. And I'd imagine at this point, most drivers know how to connect to the different apps that they need to be using, but doesn't mean they always do it.
Yeah, true. And also, whenever we're able to, we actually use the ELDs instead of the cell phone. So then it's not even on the driver anymore, right? It's us working with, our, partner carriers and getting all of that set up. And so again, nobody's really having to rely on cell phone service and drivers turning their phones off and things like that. It's just, we get the connectivity to the truck, when they decide what truck they're going to put on it, they go in the system, add in that, the truck numbers, and, it's a great way for us to keep track without having to rely on the drivers themselves.
Yeah, it kind of shifts the problem from being app driven to getting that truck number, right? So you get the ELD IDs in there and can start that tracking process. That's still a little bit of effort on that first step to make sure that you start it off right. But if you do put a little bit of energy into to start tracking and make sure the tracking starts, that can really help in the check call process later on. And that, I guess it's a perfect example of a little bit of energy up front saves a lot of energy later.
Definitely.
It makes everybody's life a little easier, but you do have to be prepared to have that conversation with the driver or with the dispatcher or the carrier, whoever's responsible for making sure that tracking does start in the first spot.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's, I guess, why it's beneficial to, connect through the ELDs, right? The dispatchers maybe have a little bit more insight into why it's good to have that connectivity, where drivers maybe are a little skittish. They don't want to be tracked, things like that. So, you're dealing with folks at the right level where the interest is there and making sure that these shipments go smoothly. And we found that the best way to achieve that is by working with, the dispatchers or somebody other than the driver, at those companies to go through the process that way.
Yeah, it's a good place to think about change management from a different perspective, and that's from the driver's side, and that they have to set this up and allow those things to be tracked. But as you said, they're the ones being tracked, and sometimes it doesn't feel good when you say you're being tracked, but there's a value add to it. There's a reason that tracking is important, and one of those reasons is fraud prevention is a pretty important one. And there's a lot of times there's a pretty large amount of money and freight in the back of that truck, so keeping track of it's pretty helpful. But getting through that process is something where there's a little more change management work that needs to be done with the carrier to help encourage them to see the value and show them the path of why it's better to use the tracking apps.
Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. A lot of keywords there, and yeah, for sure, this is one of the topics that we discuss the most here internally. And one specific idea that really resonates with me at all times is that brokers don't move freight. Like carriers move freight, but what brokers really move on a daily basis is information. So that's the value here, like timely, accurate visibility between shippers and carriers, so we can actually improve that communication and that relationship with them. As you were saying, Lina, check calls interrupt carriers, interrupt brokers as well, and half the time the update you get is already outdated minutes later. So that creates this constant, I would say, reactive rhythm, and it feels like you're busy all day long but not actually building something that is scalable. So yeah, for sure, when tracking updates are flowing automatically inside the TMS or the system that you're using, as you were saying as well, check calls becomes the exception, right? Not the rule. And then I can assure you that changes the whole customer experience for everyone. So customers stop asking questions about their loads because the system is already answering those questions before they even have to ask. So yeah, again, what we were saying before, more control, less noise, less chasing, basically.
Well, and to add to that, since you mentioned the customers, through the workflow automations, there is an automation for webhooks, which we use to then directly push that information into our customers' platforms, right? They all use different platforms to manage their side of things. So we use workflow automations and those webhooks. It doesn't require like as much coding and things like that. It makes it really easy that when a carrier submits their location update, triggers the webhook automatically to populate our customers' system as well. So now they're not having to chase information around. They get it in real time without having to enter it on their end, or having us have to enter it, the system just pushes it right over to them.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess visibility is automated and then teams stop operating in a reaction mode.
Yeah.
Very nice. You found a great solution there to require no coding to build an integration into a shipper's platform, and that's really amazing to hear. It's another place where you can just eliminate those, and I love the way that Lina, that you phrase that brokers are about sharing information, right? And if you're sharing that information across the right places and you're doing it in a timely way, it saves a tremendous amount of time and energy across the entire shipment process, and also demonstrates the expertise and that brokers are supposed to do. That's the value add, is that we have extra expertise and are able to help solve problems that shippers can't do by themselves and the carriers can't do by themselves. And I think that really helps provide that value add. So we're coming through to the end of our check call topic. Any other things, anything else check call related that either you two wanted to add?
No, we covered it all.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot of ground there, and the two main themes that came out of check calls is around using multi-channel tools to eliminate the process and as much as you can, and using exceptions to try to keep it so it's as streamlined as possible. So by using these two tools in different places, you can reduce the number of times that your team is having to make these check calls, the amount of time and energy your team is having to spend facilitating that communication. Let your systems help you facilitate the communication. Focus on the exception management to reduce that energy and build more efficiency into your application and into your processes. So these are all places that you can take a look at your overall process and see, where can I go through the track and trace process, the check calls process, and maybe eliminate 20% or 30% of my check calls. What would that look like to my team? How much time would that save them? How much energy? How many hours? How much money would that add to the bottom line? How much more scale can I bring? These are all places that can be impacted just by reducing your check calls by 20, 30%, which hopefully the things that we just covered will show you some places that you can take a look at and pull those benefits out of. Okay, so now we're going to switch to our next topic, and this is one that I think lands firmly for everyone. We talked on it a little bit before, but fraud prevention and carrier vetting. This is a really important part of the process. We hear the term fraud, I think, nonstop in the freight space now. I don't think you're allowed to say anything without fraud as being part of it, and it's important because the opportunity to steal freight is there. The enforcement is not very strong, and the creativity and intelligence of some of the people that are stealing freight gets better and better. So as the tools evolve to prevent fraud, the people that are the bad actors are looking to do even more and be more creative and stay moving forward and stay a step ahead. And I can say that it's amazing to me, the sophistication of some of the bad actors in the space. So we have to really be thoughtful about it. But then on the other hand, we also don't want fraud prevention to dominate everything that we do. We want it to be taken seriously, but also be something that's streamlined into our ecosystem and our processes. So how do we make decisions and integrate fraud prevention into those decisions? How is fraud prevention being handled as part of our streamlined process? And what fraud prevention tools are integrated into your system to make it so that your team can handle the fraud prevention and carrier vetting processes in as streamlined a way as possible? So I kind of covered a lot right there. So what I'll turn over to you is how does your team vet their carriers, vet new carriers especially, or prevent new carriers by using existing ones, and how do you handle the fraud prevention along those lines as well?
With new carriers, we do work with Highway, and they provide a really robust screening process. But really, I think the key for us is almost avoiding having to find new carriers constantly, which goes back to the truckload quoting page, right? So our first step is trying to use carriers we've worked with in the past that have proven that they're real carriers. So that's our step one, is just try to work within the carrier base that we've already established as safe. When that's not possible, which is not uncommon, we do work through highway. One of the nice things within the system is that with the highway information pulling in directly, when our team goes to send a rate confirmation, what's populating is the contact information directly out of highway, a proven contact. So you're not having to type in an email, which is a lot of times where the fraud takes place by them, adding a letter, making something plural. So by our team selecting, an existing name that's already been vetted through highway and then pulled into TIE, it takes out that type of fraud. And it makes it, I guess, less likely that they're going to get tripped up with typing in an email address that is fraudulent. It's already been vetted. We know that. And so it's really helped avoid those situations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the value of having your fraud prevention tool tied in really nicely to your TMS and your email and bringing all these components together, not only are they making a decision in context and seeing the fraud prevention or fraud concerns while they're talking to the carriers, but on top of that, you're eliminating that data entry component, right? You're eliminating that ability to sidestep and receive an email from a bad actor in the wrong way, because your system already has all that vetted. And Highways does a tremendous job on this front. And I think their general motto is no stolen freight or zero stolen loads, which is a pretty mighty effort that they're pursuing. And they've really pushed the borders there and the lines pretty far on how those tools can help prevent fraud. So being able to see that right in context and eliminate that extra work that your team's doing, or that potential typing in email addresses, can really help streamline that process. So that kind of covered the existing carriers, because there's definitely an inherent safety around using existing carriers. What about new carriers? What's the process look like for your vetting process for new carriers?
That's all run through highway. Before they even, get to that stage, there are some things that our team, will ask carriers, just to even, I guess, assess if they are somewhat reasonable, but everything else runs through highway, and we use that tool to make the decision for us. We don't want it to be subjective, or we want to try to avoid it being subjective as much as possible. So everything is routed, through highway for that vetting process.
Nice. And that happens directly while you're getting quotes from that carrier, or it'll pull through the TMS and then you'll push it directly through to highway for the vetting process.
Yep.
So again, that gives you the opportunity to do all that in context, right? So they're not having to necessarily re-enter. They're not having to second guess themselves. It's all tied together so that you're eliminating some of the potential challenges there, as well as eliminating the ability to bypass the vetting process.
Yeah. A carrier, they can't even put it into the system unless it comes from highway. So every single carrier has to have gone through the vetting process, or we cannot even enter it into the system. We can, but they can, like the team cannot. You got to have the special privileges to be able to do that. So it, forces everybody through that process.
Yeah, that's well said. There are a couple creative ways where people can bypass the guardrails that are put up, but your TMS should have enough guardrails to make sure that you're not able to send that carrier confirmation out, or even the bill lading maybe to the carrier before they've been properly vetted and before they've been allowed onto that load, which helps tie that loop up between your vetting tool and your TMS.
Yeah, and actually, one of the, I guess another aspect to it that isn't related to highway is that if like the carrier's authority is revoked and things like that, you cannot override that in TIE. Where historically we could have, or somebody could have, but there isn't even a way to override it if they don't have, their authority you absolutely cannot assign them to, I mean, you might be able to assign them to load, but you cannot send them the rate confirmation. The option isn't even there.
Yeah, that's and the goal there being that we don't want anyone to make a mistake. You know, we don't want them to overlook that step, and that's a key piece of it too, is to put these guardrails up, because I don't know that there are probably times where people are just misbehaving or doing the wrong things, but for the most part, I think when mistakes happen, it's unintentional. Like, oh, I forgot to check that highway was being used for this, or oh, I forgot to verify that we had the whole carrier packet. And I remember before we had tools like highway, the carrier packet process was a lot. Like the carriers had to go through quite a lot of process to become able to move freight, and I think those steps got missed a lot just because they added so much friction, and they weren't natural steps. Whereas today, I think that becomes a little easier. And so if you can make it easy on your team members and make sure that the process all flows together in a really streamlined way, you don't have to spend as much energy trying to make sure, like, and teach your team, don't send a carrier that hasn't gone through the vetting process with highway. You don't have to teach your team that, because it's just natural in your process. And I think that's an area where you can really get some benefits out of change management, is by showing people a pathway and setting guardrails around where the natural path and the natural flow is one that already covers all of the things that you need to get done, like the carrier vetting process.
Yeah, and having that connection between tie and highway be almost instant. If something does change on the carrier side of things, it's automatically, disabled in the system. So even though yesterday maybe they had their authority, if they don't have it today, they're deactivated in the system. Our team doesn't have to worry about if they're still okay today or not. We rely on the system to make that update. So there isn't even a chance that that's going to get missed, which can happen very easily because things do change from one day to the next. And if it's a carrier we're using regularly, somebody might not be checking. So having it automatically disabled, it's been very helpful.
It's actually really interesting and very important. And I think one of the main takeaways in here, because fraud prevention isn't really like a compliance problem, it's a timing problem, right? Like most fraud doesn't happen because teams don't care or they aren't trying, but it happens because the right information shows up too late, right? So if fraud prevention starts after the load is booked already, well, it's already failed. At that point, you're not preventing risk anymore. You're just documenting it. So yeah, kind of to recap the benefits in here, I feel like embedded fraud prevention is it's what protects teams in the right moment, the moment that matters the most. So when risk indicators are inside the workflow, the right decisions become, automatic. No extra steps, no hoping someone remembers what to check at that specific time. I think we can all agree that trust is built through consistency. And as we've been discussing today, that's exactly what scalable operations require, right? Like systems that don't depend on memory, but on reliable guardrails. So yeah, this is really what safe growth looks like. Brokers moving fast with confidence, risk reduced without added headcount in this case, and trust foundations overall.
Beautifully said. That's that brings home the fraud prevention so nicely. So thank you for adding that in there. Well, so now we've rolled through fraud prevention. I think we're probably going to stop at this because we only have a few more minutes. We'll probably wrap up a couple minutes early. But as we start closing, any additional statements or comments that you'd like to make? Well, either Lina can start.
One of the things that I think has been very helpful and saved our team a lot of time is customer visibility. We use the custom reports. There is like a link that you can embed into Power BI or Excel or any of those other tools that allows our team to do like automatic refreshes. And so we're able to provide live data to our customers just through an Excel spreadsheet that is updated every time it's open and provides all the key points of information that our customer might need, along with a link to each of the shipments. And that not having to manually look all that information up and provide it to our customer has saved our teams a big chunk of time as well.
That's a great add on the customer visibility side, because we talked about earlier how you're using workflow automation to connect to their systems, but having that ability to have an Excel file that automatically updates for them, again, eliminates some of the other side, right? It eliminates the customers having to make check calls to SFL and to the broker to get updates, so that they're seeing more real-time data. That's a really nice added tool that you put in there, just to, again, close the loop and share that information. Lina from TIE, anything to add as we come to the end?
Yeah, so I guess my takeaway will be around the whole change management topic. Everything we talked about today, well, automation, visibility, speed, margin protection, all of that only works if change is managed intentionally, right, within the operation. So one thing I keep repeating to myself is that tools don't usually fail, but adoption does. So real change doesn't always start with technology only. It really starts with a clear strategy, with strong leadership, as we discussed before. And that's something that we see every single day when we are helping new customers transition from an old TMS to TIE. When leaders are aligned on why change matters, teams don't experience change as chaos. Like, they experience it as direction, as purpose, like an intentional move, right? And just to be clear, we know that change is uncomfortable for sure, especially at the beginning, because all it does is challenge the old ways. But brokers that scale successfully are the ones that stay open to improvement, even when it's hard and even when it requires unlearning before relearning. So yeah, as we discussed today, I guess the goal isn't to ask our teams to work harder or faster, but to remove all the friction for them so they can work better. This is about, moving with intention and just knowing what you really need to scale.
That was absolutely right. Tools don't fail, but adoption does. What a great takeaway for that. And there's a couple links that are posted in here. There's a TIE strategic planning deck ebook that I definitely recommend you guys read, as well as a case study that Lina from SFL has put together for us as well. So there's two really great documents that you can bring home and take a look at to help add a little more context to what we covered. But just in conclusion, today we covered some specific areas where you can look at your business and find some efficiencies. We covered POD and document recovery and how you can streamline your processes on that side. We covered margin compression and having real-time visibility into your quoting process to help make sure that you're protecting your margins. We covered check calls and ways to reduce your check calls by significant percentage. And we covered fraud prevention and carrier vetting and some specific steps you can do to help keep that as part of the process. So through these 4 topics, I hope that you found some specific places that you can take some action and look at your processes and implement something to make your brokerage a little bit more efficient. Take one little piece at a time and show some value add into the organization, make your team's life a little bit better and yours as well. And then I think we'll close it up with Lina's statement of the tools don't fail, but adoption does. So thank you very much for the time today. And thank you, ladies, for joining me. This is a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.